Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? And what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. When it rains. The rain started as a whisper, soft droplets against the pavement, gentle tapping on window panes. It slid down the marble columns of the Lancaster estate, tracing thin veins of water over the stone as if the house itself were bleeding. The air was thick with petrichor, the earthy scent of damp soil mixing with the ghostly perfume of jasmine from the overgrown trellis near the entrance. The sound of the rain was a symphony, each drops a note in a haunting melody. Samuel Lancaster stood in the doorway, the dim light from the crystal chandelier behind him casting his long shadow across the polished floor. His hands rested at his sides, fingers twitching as if longing to close around something solid. There she was, past the wrought iron gate, the empty street, and the veil of shifting mist. The woman. She hadn't moved in over an hour. The street lamp's sickly glow barely touched her figure, making her less a person and more a presence, a smear of darkness against the silver rain. A too-still silhouette, head tilted slightly, hair damp and clinging to her face like seaweed. Her dress, though soaked through, didn't shiver in the wind. The rain should have driven her away by now, made her step back, retreat, turn. But she stood like a statue left out in the storm, untouched by the cold. Her eyes, a piercing shade of blue, seemed to hold a secret. Samuel exhaled slowly, his breath fogging in the night air. A drop of water slid from his temple to his jaw, tracing a path like a fingertip, slow and deliberate. His heartbeat drummed a quiet rhythm beneath his ribs. She was watching him. The space between them crackled with tension, like a held breath, stretched taut, waiting to snap. The wind carried the faint creak of the gate as it swayed as if something had nudged it to open an inch. He should turn away. He should close the door. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. The suspense was palpable, hanging in the air like the heavy scent of jasmine. 3 months earlier. The funeral was as it should have been, quiet, respectful, and filled with the appropriate sorrow. A sea of black-clad mourners huddled beneath a sky heavy with unshed rain, their hushed whispers blending with the wind and their murmured condolences dissolving into the damp air. The scent of fresh earth and dying flowers clung to the cemetery, a cloying mix of life and decay. Samuel stood beside Rosa's parents, his posture perfectly composed, his hands cold despite the warm breeze that drifted through the headstones. The wind carried the distant chime of church bells, a sound that should have been comforting but instead felt like a warning, hollow and stretched too thin. Rosa's mother clung to him, her grip trembling, the sharp edges of her nails pressing into the sleeve of his tailored suit. The silk barely shielded him from the pressure, and he wondered absently if she realized how tightly she was holding on, as if he were the last thread tying her daughter's memory to the world. "She loved you so much, Sam," she whispered, her voice fragile, her breath warm against his shoulder. She always talked about how lucky she was. He let his arms wrap around her, his grip firm but distant, offering comfort in the way one might comfort a stranger. His voice was smooth and practiced. "I was the lucky one." The words sat heavy on his tongue, yet weightless in his chest. After the service, his boss pulled him aside, speaking in the hushed, measured tone people reserved for grief they did not fully understand. "Take all the time you need," he said. "A loss like this, I can't imagine. We'll hold things down at the office." Samuel nodded, thanked him, and allowed himself to be led away. He had learned his role well, the grieving husband, the shattered man. But grief did not settle in his bones the way it should have. It did not wrap around his chest like a vice, and did not steal his lungs' breath. The days that followed blurred into routine. Once filled with soft laughter and the scent of jasmine tea, the house was now an echo chamber of silence. The bed felt too large, the sheets too smooth, and the bed was untouched on one side. The absence was loud in ways he had never anticipated. The refrigerator's hum at night, the absence of her toothbrush beside his, the ghost of her perfume in the closet, clinging to clothes she would never wear again. His attempts to find solace in his routine only highlighted the void left by her absence. He returned to work, slipping into meetings with robotic precision. His colleagues watched him from the corners of their eyes, their whispers thick with assumptions. His struggle to connect with others was palpable, and his isolation was a heavy shroud. Tennis became an escape, something physical, something that burned. The slam of the ball against the court, the sting of exertion in his muscles. He played too hard, his swings reckless, and the force behind each hit made the others exchange wary glances. "You okay, Sam?" one of them asked after he missed an easy return, standing frozen at the net, his grip tightening around the handle of his racket. He forced a smile. "Just tired." They didn't believe him. 3 months later. It had been exactly 3 months since Rosa's funeral. It was also her birthday. The sky was the color of slate, heavy and bruised with approaching rain. The first droplets streaked against the windshield as Samuel drove home, the rhythmic hiss of the wipers cutting through the silence. The city blurred past in smears of neon and shadow, the rain distorting the world into something unreal, something shifting. Then he saw her. She stood on the sidewalk near his building, her frame half illuminated by a flickering street lamp. A woman, barefoot, half naked, her soaked dress clinging to her like a second skin. Her dark hair hung in wet ropes over her face, strands plastered against her pale cheek. Samuel's hands clenched around the wheel, fingers pressing deep into the worn leather. The rain ran down her body in thin rivulets, but something darker streaked her skin. Mud. Blood. The water pooled at her feet, carried swirls of something deep red, vanishing into the gutter. His foot hesitated on the accelerator. The headlights cast her in stark relief. The sharp planes of her face, the unnatural stillness of her posture, the way her shoulders trembled, but her gaze did not falter. It was as if time had frozen, and Samuel was trapped in this eerie moment. She was looking at him. His chest tightened, breath catching somewhere between his ribs. "Just drive past. Don't stop." He swallowed, forced his foot down, and the car lurched forward. The engine's low hum filled the space around him, but it did nothing to drown out the nagging pulse at the back of his mind. His inner turmoil was a storm raging within him, threatening to consume him. Check the mirror. His eyes flicked upward. She hadn't moved. The rain distorted everything, turning streetlights into watery halos and reflections into shifting phantoms. But she was still there, standing in the same spot, watching. Samuel's throat felt dry, his pulse hammering too fast against his skin. He exhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders, forcing himself to let go of the tension gripping his spine. A trick of the rain. An exhausted mind conjuring ghosts where none existed. He repeated this mantra, trying to convince himself, but the disbelief in his own words was palpable. He told himself that all the way home. As the storm drummed against his windows and thunder rattled the glass that night, he dreamt of her. And the next time it rained, she was there again. His colleagues noticed at work. During lunch meetings, he barely touched his food, stirring it absently, his gaze vacant as though listening to something only he could hear. His coffee sat untouched, growing cold. On the tennis court, he flinched when the first drops of rain hit the ground, his grip tightening around the racket like a lifeline. He missed easy shots. His movements were sluggish, his reaction time dull, as if something invisible weighed him down. Conversations trailed off when he entered the room. Stares lingered too long. They thought he didn't notice, but he did. The way his co-workers watched him from the corners of their eyes, whispering in hushed tones, their concern curdling into unease. One afternoon, his boss pulled him aside, his voice laced with careful hesitation. "Sam, are you all right?" There was a measured pause. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Samuel forced a laugh, a short, hollow sound that scraped against his throat. "Just haven't been sleeping well." A lie, a thin, brittle thing. No one believed him. And then, on the 7th night of rain, he saw her again. Not a faceless, blood-streaked specter. Her, Rosa. She stood beneath the street lamp, motionless, the downpour slicking her hair to her skin. Her dress, the same one from their last night together, clung to her like the tide that had swallowed her whole. Satin, deep blue, heavy with rain, darkened at the hem with something thicker than water. Samuel's breath turned to ice in his lungs. Her dark hair fell in familiar waves over her shoulders, curling like the foam of breaking waves. Her lips trembled just slightly, but her eyes, God, her eyes, were locked onto him with a weight that crushed the air from his chest. Lightning slashed across the sky. In that brief, stuttering flash of light, he saw her fully. The pallor of her skin, the sheen of water clinging to her, and the deep red staining the hem of her dress, blooming outward like ink in water. And then she screamed. The sound ripped through the night, a jagged, guttural wail that shattered something inside him. It wasn't just in his ears. Inside his skull, bones, and himself. A raw, piercing shriek clawed at his mind, peeling him open and unraveling him like threads stripped from the edge of a frayed rope. Samuel collapsed, knees hitting the pavement, hands clamping over his ears. Stop, stop, stop. But the scream didn't stop. It wouldn't stop. Because it wasn't just a scream. It was rage. It was pain. It was vengeance. It drowned him, dragged him under like the waves had dragged her. And in that suffocating abyss, a memory surfaced, sharp, inescapable. Not an accident, not a misstep. He had killed her. The wine glass trembled in his grip. The slow swirl of the drug dissolves, invisible, into a deep red. Her laughter had softened and slurred. Her eyelids had fluttered, her body leaning into him with blind trust. How he had lifted her effortlessly over the yacht's railing. Her body had hit the water like a whisper, silent, vanishing into the dark. He had watched the bubbles rise, population vanish. He had waited, waited, waited. She never came back up, and yet now, here she was. The hospital was quiet, save for the rain tapping against the barred windows, a ceaseless, rhythmic whisper against the glass. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly above, casting a cold, sterile glow over the pale walls. The air smelled of antiseptic and damp linen, the scent settling heavy in Samuel's lungs like a weight he could never quite exhale. He sat hunched on the stiff mattress, hands tangled in his graying hair, his fingers pressing into his scalp as if trying to dig something out. A memory, a voice, a nightmare that refused to die. The orderlies moved past his door in shuffling patterns, their voices distant, their presence insignificant. He barely noticed them anymore. They came. They went. They pushed little white pills into his palm and watched to ensure he swallowed. It didn't matter. The pills did nothing. Nothing could stop her. A flash of lightning split the sky. Samuel turned his head toward the window, his breath already shallow, his muscles locking tight. He knew what he would see. He always did. She was there. Standing just beyond the bars, the pale, flickering light haloed her body. Her soaked dress clung to her frame, the dark, heavy fabric dripping onto the windowsill. Her bare feet hovered above the rain-slicked pavement outside, toes barely grazing the surface. They were not touching. Never touching. Her hair, once soft waves that tumbled over her shoulders, now hung in tangled ropes, strands sticking to the sunken hollows of her face. Her skin, pallid and waterlogged, stretched too tight over her cheekbones. Her lips, blue, trembling, parted slightly, but no breath escaped. Her appearance was a grotesque mockery of the woman he once knew. She stared. Samuel's pulse thudded against his ribs. His stomach turned, but he couldn't move. He never could. Her arm rose, slow and deliberate, droplets sliding from her fingertips. A single, shaking finger extended, pointing directly at him, accusing, unrelenting. Then, the scream. The room shattered with sound, not just a noise, not just a voice, a force. A jagged, piercing wail rattled the glass, made the walls tremble, and tore through him. Samuel clamped his hands over his ears, but it was useless. The scream wasn't just in the air, it was inside him. It flooded his veins and scraped at the marrow of his bones. It filled every corner of the room and every cell of his body, vibrating, suffocating, and drowning. He slammed himself against the wall, gasping, clawing at his arms, trying to rip something out, something buried beneath his skin. His own sobs broke through, raw and animalistic, but the scream only grew louder, pressing against his skull like a storm waiting to burst. His futile escape attempts only served to highlight his desperation. No one came to help him. No one ever did. The hospital's silence, the absence of any comforting presence, only deepened his isolation. The rain poured outside, heavy, relentless, a drumbeat to his unraveling. She did not leave. She never would. Ever would. Ever would.
The Pinch, ELCV 28, Earth's last chance vessel 28, was slowing down after 5 months at elevated distance speed. The 3-person crew were starting to feel the pinch. The pinch, as it had become known, was the phenomenon whereby the greater the distance from Earth, the more the human heart and brain would become panicked, fatigued, strained, and lost, as though there was an invisible bungee attaching everyone's core to the planet. There wasn't yet an acceptable scientific explanation for this effect. But the crew of the ELC-28 were really feeling it. They had just crossed the 960 million kilometers from the Earth, heading perpendicular to the gravitational rotation of the solar system. "It's always worse going south," Carl said with a smirk, looking across the table at 2 distraught faces. "What do you mean, south?" Casper said angrily. "There is no south, north, east, west. Just black, black everywhere. Listen, I've been through this 7 times, Carl said, trying to keep his cool and maintain a sense of leadership. "And that's another thing," Pearl said, getting drawn in by Casper's outrage. "How can this be the last chance if there were already 27 previous last chances that have failed?" The Earth's last chance missions had been funded globally and quickly established as the best chance of survival for the human race. Every nation had poured all of their resources and remaining workforce into it. Since it had been scientifically established 50 years prior that humanity would not survive much beyond 3397 on its current trajectory without finding another safe, inhabitable planet or a source of infinitely extractable energy. It was a question that had floated between Casper and Pearl for some time now. What had happened to the previous 27? And how had Carl come back every time? The first 15 ELC missions had been manned by larger and more experienced crews. By the 20th, there was no time to train anyone to the standard that was required. By this point, people were mandatorily encouraged to join a crew in a variety of ways. Shorter prison sentences, the promise of financial security for their extended family, and the knowledge they may be helping the survival of the human race as a whole. But it was becoming ever harder to recruit new people. Pearl was a space cadet in her 20s before the sudden, unexpected, and overwhelming societal dread. Now she wanted to volunteer in the hopes her kids might survive. Casper had some experience as an astronaut before being forcibly ejected after jeopardizing a mission due to drug use aboard the ship 5 years prior. He had been court-martialed, but promised a complete pardon if he volunteered for the ELC missions. "Think yourselves lucky," Carl said. "The first 3 missions I was on had 10-person crews, then 6. Now we're down to 3. It's much easier this way. More food, more room. All we have to do now is locate the BL hip and choose who's going in first." The BL hip, black hole with inversion potential, was a discovery made in the year 2868. A micro black hole less than 300 microns in diameter could, with the right equipment, be inverted to create a temporary door in space, which could theoretically lead anywhere. The hardest part was locating the BLH reps. The ELCV-28 was the furthest any ELC had had to travel so far, and it was understood that the effect of the pinch could be life-threatening beyond 1,000 million kilometers. The first attempt to send anything through a BLA chip in 2950 was an automated sensor-packed bot. But the bots would only be able to communicate data back to the vessel for a maximum of 20 minutes before losing all connection. It was later deemed more cost-effective to attempt to send humans through, with the hope of reopening the door for them to return with any data collected. This was soon stopped after 5 failed missions, as it was believed inhumane, as the participants were never heard from again after entering the BLA chip until the recent determination of the definitive extinction of the human race. "Do you ever go first?" Casper said cynically. "Well, no, not so far." Carl defensively shot back. "Listen, like it or not, I am the captain on this ship. I have the most experience, and I'll have to be here to guide us home. Guide one of us home," Pearl said. "Only you and one of us have any hope of making it home, right?" When she said home, her voice cracked sorrowfully. "Look, you have to fight the effects of the pinch. I know it's getting to us all, but if we let it, we'll end up like ELCV-9. And no one wants that." "What happened on ELCV-9? asked Casper. "Let's just say they never made it to the BL hip," said Carl. The only reason I'm able to deal with the pinch is because I've done this so many times. I'm used to it now, and I know how to keep myself together. But rest assured, I'm feeling it too. This is the furthest I've been, and it's starting to put a strain on me. So you've never been in a BL hip? But you're happy to send us in, knowing we won't come back out, Pearl said, with a sense of righteous outrage. Oh, I've been in, Pearl, said Carl. Do you think they'd let me lead these missions if I'd never been in? And people come out all the time when there's nothing on the other side worth exploring. And if they're quick enough to realize that fact and get back through the BL hip before it closes. What was it like on the other side? Pearl asked skeptically. Black, just black, Carl said. Zeus scanner deployment. The standard procedure is to send through a scanner bot to establish the chances of anything worth exploring before sending in a human. The data received back from the bots is usually minimal, and often scrambled to the point that it's not 100% reliable. Then humans go through anyway. Okay, Casper, you can pilot the scanner. Just remember, the beam can only hold the BH lip open for 5 minutes, so get yourself perfectly lined up, Carl commanded. Casper sat facing the controls for the scanner and began maneuvering it into place. If I'm doing this part, that means I'm not the first one going in, right? Casper insisted. Afraid that's not how it works, Casp, Carl said firmly. The scanner was guided through the 5-meter hole in space. The hole that had opened wasn't black, as Casper and Pearl were expecting, but an iridescent glow of pink and purple. Beautiful and mesmerizing, yet somehow off-putting, like oil in a puddle. Pearl and Casper had returned to sitting in the recreational dining area of the ship, while Carl pored over the scanner results. After 45 minutes, Carl walked in. Okay, do you want the good news or the bad news? Carl said, smiling. What the hell does that mean? Casper reacted angrily. Keep a handle on the pinch, Carl said calmly. No need to start losing it over every little thing. Okay, the good news is there is a strong reading of biological and atmospheric conditions within an area reachable in a solo flight suit. The solo flight suits were designed for independent space travel with built-in directable propulsion and terrestrial landing capability. They had a range of up to 190,000 kilometers in open space, but don't have the power or propulsion to lift off once within the gravitational influence of a planet. And the bad news? Asked Pearl. The bad news is that one of you two is going to have to go in and try to reach it, and report back anything you find, Carl said glumly. But not you? Casper said, red in the face. Casper, we've been through this, Carl said tiredly. The important thing is that as soon as you touch down, you report back with as much information as you can gather. On your communicator, keep in mind you may only have minutes before the BL hip closes. So who decides who goes in? Pearl asks. Well, I'll give you both 30 minutes. And if neither of you have decided, I'll decide, Carl said matter-of-factly. Carl left them both sitting across from each other at the dining table and retreated to the cockpit, keeping an ear out for any overreactive arguments. Carl knew that this was the time that anger had spilt over into violence in the past. His mind recollected the stories he'd heard about ELCV9 and shuddered. Not on my watch, Carl thought to himself. So do you want to go in first? Pearl said, trying to maintain a tone of civil diplomacy. I mean, let's face it, we're probably both going in eventually. I take it from your tone that you're not going to volunteer yourself, and that you want me to want to go in to alleviate your conscience. Casper responded calmly, but with an air of arrogance. And next, I expect you'll bring up your children and talk about how much you would love to see them again, to try to guilt me into doing the right thing. Only the right thing, in this context, just happens to be the thing that you want. Casper's tone was becoming increasingly aggravated. Fine, I'll go first, Pearl said. Carl, who'd been listening the whole time through the ship's wall, walked into the dining area with authority. Okay, I've decided, Pearl. As Casper said, we both understand that you're probably desperate to see your kids again. But for that to happen, you will have to go in. And Casper, if Pearl goes in first, you will be right behind her, no matter what, Carl said, remembering his training. Okay, fine. I'll go first, Casper said. Good choice, Carl said, looking proudly at Casper. Ix first entry. Casper suited up and stepped out of the ship's airlock. Carl and Pearl watched from the cockpit window as he powered towards the glowing hole in space. They watched as Casper fearlessly approached and slipped through. Are you hearing me, Casper? Carl spoke into the ship's communicator. What do you see? I can hear you all right, Casper said, with an excitable inflection. All sounds of the pinch had gone from his voice. Woo! It's beautiful. What sort of planet is it? Carl asked. Nothing came back from the communicator for what felt like hours, but was only minutes. It's just like Carl heard eventually, followed by a long, drawn-out beep. What did he say? Pearl asked in an excitable tone. It's just like And then it cut off. Carl answered. Just like what? Pearls said, frustrated. I don't know. Carl responded. Let's listen to it back again. Carl replayed the message. It's just like came out of the machine. Pearl said, puzzled. What? Recognize? Remember? You're going to have to go in after him, Pearl, Carl said, looking back at her. And you'll follow, right? Pearl said pleadingly. Of course, I'm not going to miss another opportunity, Carl said. What does that mean? Pearl asked, frowning. It wasn't just Black, the one you went through. Was it Carl? You were just too afraid to make landfall because you knew that would be a one-way ticket. Carl looked down ashamed. It wasn't as simple as that, Carl said. There are lots of planets that can come back with breathable atmospheres on the scanners. But when people go through, it's a death trap. The one I saw when I went through was not right. The sky was orange, and the land was black. I knew straight away that if I touched down, I'd never be coming back. So you were scared, Pearl scoffed. And yet you've sent plenty of scared people to their deaths. How do you know this one will be any different? And yet you are more than happy to send me through. Casper said, "It's beautiful." Do you think he would have said that if it didn't at least look safe? Carl said encouragingly. The BL hip will stay open long enough for you to establish a connection with Casper. He should have made landfall by now if it's safe. And you'll know if you should turn back. And you can come straight back through. Ix landfall. With that, Pearl suited up and reluctantly entered. Carl sat waiting, watching, and trying to calculate how long it might take for Pearl to communicate with Casper, and how long he'd have before the BL hip would close. Anything from Casper? Carl asked nervously through the communicator. Is he alive? A long pause. Wait, he's talking, Pearl said. He's ranting and raving. I can barely make it out. Another long pause. He says it's Ert, Pearl said. With that, the BL hip closed suddenly. Carl sunk his head into his hands in despair. It's Earth? Carl thought. Was that what Casper was saying? It can't be. There are no BL hips that close to Earth. I would know. Unless one has formed since we've been traveling. Or maybe a new BL hip is created when we travel, though? Nobody knows for sure. Carl thought. He sat and dwelled on this new information for some time. He could wait for Pearl to make landfall, then travel through. But if Casper was wrong, then he, Pearl, and the ship would all be lost. And if he was right, and it was, in fact, Earth, all that's been achieved is finding a shortcut back home. Still would have lost the ship, and the Earth would still be on a collision course with annihilation. But at least he would have proven himself courageous enough to follow the crew through a BL hip, or he could open the BL hip right now in the hopes he could at least save Pearl before she attempts to land. But save her how? We're all dead either way. If I bring her back on board, we'll just head back to Earth with no confirmed news of salvation. Carl was distraught and angry with his inability to think clearly. He was supposed to be the one to keep a clear head and make firm decisions. Damn pinch, Carl thought. Carl opens the BL hip and tries to establish a connection with Pearl on the communicator. It's taking too long, Carl thinks. Suddenly, he can hear Pearl's breathing coming through. Pearl? How far are you from landfall? There's not much time. Carl shouts through the mic quickly. I'm within the gravitational pull now, Pearl says excitedly. Casper's on the ground and he's breathing without his suit. He says it's safe. Send a message home. Carl quickly uses the onboard computer to send a message back to Earth. This is ELCV-28. We've found a new home, location details included. Begin the evacuation process. Carl hits send and prays that was the right decision. He climbs into his suit and heads towards the BLA chip. This is it. He thinks. Carl gets through just as Pearl is making landfall. How was the descent? Carl asks. Fine. Not much in the way of clear landing areas. Pearls responds. A lot of flora and fauna where I am. Flora and fauna? Carl says. That doesn't sound like the Earth I remember. Have you got a connection with Casper? No, his communicator cut off abruptly about a few seconds ago, Pearl said, concerned. I'm going to de-suit now. Carl tried to establish a connection with Casper, but nothing but static came through. How's the air? Carl asked. Clean. Weirdly clean, Pearl said, taking deep breaths. Carl was getting close to the inescapable gravitational pull of the planet. He soaked up the beauty of this vantage point. It looked like Earth, green land and sun and oceans. Carl couldn't contain his excitement, but something was different. Carl didn't recognize any of the continents. A scream pierced Carl's ears through his communicator. Then Pearl's voice came through panicked. Carl, turn back now. Get back to the ship and send another message to home. This is not Earth. This is not a safe planet. All that followed was screaming, the sounds of bones crunching, and a strange, savage, terrifying, deep roar. Carl checked the altimeter on his suit. Now entering inescapable gravity, the penultimate. It was a bit of a shock to see Sophie again at the door on a Thursday evening during the pre-news sitcoms, because by all accounts, she was quite dead. Peter Lander distinctly recalled kissing her passionately, bittersweetly even, because it was their last kiss, and he knew it even if she didn't, right before he blew her brains out with his Colt python. He knew he was right, because Eileen made a big fuss. Why the hell did you kiss her? She's my wife. Not anymore. True. And given the insides of her skull, confettied all over the living room. And that later that week, they put the rest of the package 6 feet under. And then a day after that, they collected on the staggering life insurance. Yes, Sophie was dead. She had to be. And yet, hello, Peter, said Sophie, standing at their door. Said Peter. Dirt dribbled from her dress and hair, and actually, she was covered in dirt. No makeup, but her hair was done up, and frankly, she looked like she might just have gotten back from a rainy rugby match, which she for some reason played in her funeral dress. And maybe she was a little paler than usual. Oh, and she had that gaping hole in her forehead, of course. Sophie rolled her eyes, pushed past him, and muttered something about, "Why don't I let myself in?" Peter followed her to the kitchen, where Eileen was making herself a vodka cranberry. Oh my God! said Eileen. Her tone was shocked, but not the kind of shocked you get when you see a dead person walking around, but rather when you see the wrong dead person walking around, like when you're in line at the express checkout, but the old guy in front has more than 10 items, and it's noisy, and the AC doesn't work, and a greasy tween elbows you in the boob and doesn't even notice, much less apologize. Peter, what the hell? She just showed up, he said with a shrug. What do you want from me? Right, said Sophie. She placed a briefcase on the kitchen table, her lawyering briefcase from back when she was alive, and a lawyering, and unclasped it. Gather round. Family meeting time. Peter and Eileen sat, though she huffed and crossed her arms and kept the vodka at hand. Are you even part of our family anymore? Eileen asked. Sophie glared her silent. Then she pulled out piles of papers, old yellow paper, covered in horrid red ink, all over the table. Soph, Peter said. And then he winced. He never really knew how to broach deeper topics with her, which was maybe why their marriage was so-so. What's happened to you? Are you a ghost? She's obviously a zombie, Eileen snapped. I told you to use the shotgun, but did you listen? No. Sophie drew herself up and sniffed. I am not a ghost, Peter. Ghosts aren't real. Out of her briefcase, she pulled out, reverently, a ruby-red fountain pen. Except it wasn't merely ruby red, it was ruby, with a gold nib, and placed it gently beside her. Neither am I anything so gauche as a zombie, Eileen pouted. I am a revenant. Peter and Eileen shared a look. What's a revenant? He asked. I'll put it this way. When I ran into the devil in hell, told you lawyers went to hell, Eileen said, sneering. Sophie cleared her throat. When I ran into the devil, I made a deal with him. He'd let me come back as an undead murder machine so that I could wreak unholy vengeance on those who wronged me. You know, tear you limb from limb, eat your heart, and drag your sorry soul back down with me. Kind of one last big hurrah in the world of the living. Peter gulped. Eileen dropped her glass, which wobbled on the table and spilled all over her lap. Thing is, Sophie continued, holding up a parchment covered in bloody writing, I've gone over this contract hundreds of times, and as soon as I kill you, I go back too. But not until. She took a couple fresher-looking sheets of yellow paper and slid them across the table, one each for Peter and Eileen. So, I'm willing to offer you a deal. Feel free to read over that. But the gist is, I don't murder you. And in exchange, I get to live here and get access to the millions from my life insurance policy. Peter looked at his paper and gulped. Is this written in blood? It's Lucifer ink, by Lucifer Inc., Sophie said. Then, with a distant look in her eyes and an unsubtle tremble, she added, Blood tends to boil down there. Oh, it is written on human leather, though. Peter and Eileen dropped their papers. What if we don't sign? Eileen asked. Then I murder you now and drag your soul down to hell. Can we just shoot you again? Peter asked. Technically, yes. But come on, Peter. Use your thinking brain. I'm already dead. Even if you managed to destroy my body by blowing it up or something, I'd just come right back, like some cheesy slasher flick. And the neighbors would probably complain about the noise. Oh, Peter and Eileen held quiet counsel for just a moment, wiggling their eyebrows and making meaningful expressions at each other. Of course, since Sophie knew them both intimately, one as a husband and the other also as a mistress, their secret language was no secret to her. She lay her ruby pen before them. What kind of pen is that? Asked Eileen. A pen par excellence. The pen ultimate. The devil's very own quill. Utterly binding on a soul level. I might have swiped it from his desk. What? Don't look at me like that. It's not like I can possibly get into even more trouble. What choice did they have? They signed. Then for a second, they shimmered in a red glow and experienced a pang of bowel distress. And it was done. And Sophie moved back into the house she paid for. Her old firm wouldn't take her back when she called. No offense, Soph. And I mean that. You were one of the best, for sure. It's just people already see us as ghoulish. And if we brought you back, well, it'd no longer be libel, would it? So she plopped herself down on the living room couch, right in the middle, so Peter and Eileen couldn't cuddle up on it while watching a nice rom-com or something. Not that they watched rom-coms, because Sophie had control of the remote, and she binged trashy reality TV 24 hours a day. Maybe someone else would want to watch something, Eileen said. Maybe someone else should get a job and buy the TV, Sophie snapped. And 24 hours a day really was 24 hours a day, since Sophie didn't sleep. You mind turning that down at night? Peter asked, after he caught himself humming a reality theme song in the shower. It's just, I can't sleep. Yes, Peter, said Sophie. I do mind. And then she cranked the volume up. The only thing that competed with the blaring TV was the shrill ding of the doorbell, going off like clockwork. Also, at all hours of the day. Having some free time, for perhaps the first time in her life, Sophie crawled the online shopping sites and splurged on whatever caught her eye. After all, her life insurance money was as much hers as anyone else's. And given this was her retirement, she had nothing to save for. The lack of responsibility felt liberating. The living room was soon filled with unread books, unworn clothes, unwatched movies, unexercised workout machines, and uneaten chocolate. Somewhere, she even found a life-size alabaster unicorn, whose horn scratched up the low ceiling. And because she refused to budge from the couch, muttering something about the sentimental value of it being the place her brain was ejected. It fell to Peter and Eileen to get the deliveries. It was exhausting in their spare moments. Peter and Eileen mostly stuck to the kitchen, where the blaring TV was at least a little muted. Having company over was difficult, because all their friends understandably kept bringing up the Sophie situation. And frankly, it was getting embarrassing explaining themselves over and over, and stressing that the living room was Sophie's room, and so it was best to leave it be. Eileen hit the bottle increasingly hard, and Peter took up smoking again. Easy, since Sophie no longer nagged him about it. "This isn't working for me," Eileen said one night. Peter nodded. "This isn't how I pictured our early retirement." Peter nodded again. "Are you listening to me?" "Christ, yes. What do you want from me?" "I want the life of luxury I was promised. I want to be able to host our friends with swanky parties." She pouted. "I want my yacht." Peter rolled his eyes. "Don't you dare," he sighed and massaged the bridge of his nose. "It's not ideal, is it? What can we do? I thought we were rid of her. Be nice." "No," said Eileen. "I'm sick of this. I wish we never signed that stupid contract." "Well, she would have murdered us. And, you know, the whole hell thing. Whatever." Then Eileen's eyes lit up. "Hey, maybe there's a loophole. Where's the contract?" Stealing Sophie's briefcase wasn't too hard, what with the TV blaring, and her attention focused entirely on the very real antics of the very real people on display. They brought it back to the kitchen for some privacy and started going through the papers. Sophie's contract with the devil was huge. It took them a solid week to go through it. A week made all the harder by the constant interruptions from deliveries. But finally, on Friday, they hit on something. Footnote 28397, Peter read. "Note that the Revenant has license to seek revenge on exactly one former aggressor. As soon as such an aggressor is slain, the Revenant contract is concluded, and both souls become the property of Lucifer Inc. Note that collateral damage is permitted." "What's that mean?" Eileen asked. "I'm reading. Hold on. Basically, if she blows us up or something, that's fine too. The contract's done when one of us dies, but there's no penalty, I guess, if we're both dead." "Super. So very encouraging." "Shh. Wait. There's more." Peter adjusted his glasses and took a drag on his cigarette. "Note also that the contract will be concluded if any of the aggressors should die by any means, whether caused by the Revenant or not. This includes, but is not limited to, traffic accidents, war, acts of God, peanut butter, old age, or being murdered by someone else." Said Eileen, setting her drink down. Said Peter. "What do you suppose that means?" "I guess," Eileen hedged, "if one of us were to die, then..." Peter set his cigarette down on the table. He locked eyes with Eileen, and neither blinked, as an ad for an energy drink roared in the background. At once, She flew at the counter, and he dived for the pantry. And they both kicked over their kitchen table. Eileen grabbed the first things available to her, a cutting board covered in raw, soon-to-be schnitzels, and a gory meat tenderizer. She flung the floppy meat patties across the room and roared, hoisting her tenderizer into the air. And then, with a shriek, brought her cutting board up, just in time to block the worst of a volley of canned pinto beans. Peter charged her with a battle cry, holding a jumbo can of tomato juice with both hands. He leapt at her, right as she swung. Her tenderizer savaged his temple, but he tackled her. "I think we should see other people," he roared, bringing his can of tomato juice down and down again. Eileen screamed, desperately blocking with her cutting board and flailing her face tenderizer, until it finally connected with his jaw. It was enough for her to push him off and then roll on top. And now Peter was on the defensive. "It's not you, it's me," she cried. And each time her weapon came down, torrents of blood, or tomato, it was hard to tell, splattered everything. They rolled again when Peter was able to get a hold of a raw schnitzel and shove it into her face. And then again, when she managed to can opener his ear. And on it went, until they both flopped onto the kitchen floor, gasping for breath, covered in cuts and bruises and meat. "Truce," he wheezed. "Yeah," she managed, and then coughed. "I thought killing was supposed to get easier after the first one." "Hey, do you smell that?" Eileen sniffed. "Is something burning?" Laboriously, they both sat up and found their kitchen to be on fire. The worst of the blaze was their table, which had been covered in Sophie's dry old contracts, Eileen's liquor, and Peter's lit cigarette. "Oh, hell," he muttered as the flames drew closer. Then they both screamed for help. Sophie ignored them at first, because their drama was just too much, and nowhere near as interesting as TV. But it grated on her enough that she finally rose off the couch. By then, the kitchen was a conflagration, with nary any raw meat in sight, neither schnitzel nor Peter and Eileen. "Damn it," she said, planting her hands on her hips. "You two are just the worst." And then she exploded into a cloud of sulfur and flame, and the house burned down. C-section. Scar. I can pack all of my belongings and my son's in under 30 minutes. I attribute part of this to my military kid upbringing. My parents liked to live the minimalist lifestyle. They'd only put a few decorations up here and there. And while I hated seeing bare walls on each house or apartment we lived in, I definitely see the appeal now. My son is homeschooled because it is easier to do that than explain to his teachers why we move so often. And before you ask, it's not because of the military. Granted, my son is only in first grade, so I'm finding the material relatively easy to teach. But I'm sure in a few years, it'll get hairy. My son, Carter, is always a good sport about leaving. He may not fully understand why at times, but he's too young for me to tell the whole story, and I don't want to burden him with that right now. This has been the longest we've stayed in one place. It's almost been 8 months now, which I've found is long enough for Carter to make friends, and I loved and hated that at the same time. Not at the thought of him making friends, but the inevitable conversation I'm going to have with him when the time comes to leave. He took the last move a little hard, and frankly, I did too. I moved us to the West Coast, a place I had always wanted to live since I was little, but never got the chance to. I wanted Carter to breathe in the saltiness of the seawater, put his feet in the sand, and build sand castles. I wanted him to experience what it was like to just be a kid for once, and hopefully put down roots. And he got to do that, but only for a measly 4 weeks. Now, living in dreary Seattle, a place I never wanted to move because of its constant gloominess and downpouring rain, is the place we get to call home. Well, at least until she finds us again. And I hope, for Carter's sake, she won't. I supposed I should now tell you the story of why we are running. On the day that I turned 38, I realized how quickly my biological clock was ticking. I had 2 failed marriages at that point, and I was desperate to have my own child. I did a few rounds of IVF using a sperm donor, and when I received countless negative pregnancy tests, my hope dwindled, and so did my bank account. I felt hopeless until my sister volunteered to carry my child for me and be my surrogate. I was surprised, to say in the least, considering we had a rocky relationship over the years and rarely saw eye to eye. But when she offered to be my surrogate, it was as though we had a clean slate. Though I'll admit at times that I was jealous that she could be pregnant while I couldn't. But I knew without her, I wouldn't be having a child. I was just thankful she was doing this for me. Her labor was horrendous. She pushed and pushed for hours and wanted nothing more than a natural home birth. The home birth was one she planned for as soon as she found out she was pregnant. Instead, she was taken to the hospital for an emergency C-section. I held her hand the entire time throughout the ride in the ambulance and to the surgery. I felt as though I had taken a breath for the first time when I heard his cry. When he was set in my arms instead of hers, I watched her joyous expression turn to envy. As she laid in the hospital bed, recovering, she stared at him in the bassinet before turning to me. "Can I name him?" My eyes flickered towards her, her mouth agape as she gave me a sweet smile. "Name him?" I asked, still in awe. Yeah, I had a whole list of names while I was pregnant, and now that I've seen him, I have the perfect name. She paused, waiting for my reaction. I raised my eyebrow and she replied, "Elliot." Excitement was written all over her face as soon as she said it. While I didn't hate the name, I have always wanted to name my son Carter. There were no words to explain how grateful I was that she did this for me. But I couldn't just give up the name that I've been wanting to use for years. Carter Elliott Smith. Her face dimmed when I said this. "So you won't use Elliot as his first name?" I shook my head, and she plastered on a fake smile, one that I thought was real at the time. "I love it." When I left to go to the bathroom, I thought I heard her call him Elliot, but I didn't know if I was just being paranoid and hearing things, so I brushed it off. The first couple months were hard, way harder than I was expecting. He was colicky, barely sleeping, and therefore neither did I. My sister was more than helpful, and even started living in my guest room to help with those late-night feeds and anything else I needed. It was perfect until I woke up one morning and they were gone. It took me almost a week to find them, and that was only because my mom managed to trap them at her house. My mom knew that she took him as her own when she called him Elliot. Now, looking back at it, I wish I never would have taken her up on her offer. Not that I don't love my son, but I don't love having to move every time she discovers where we live. I hoped she would move on by now, but she's reminded of Carter anytime she glances down at her C-section scar. I heard feet scuffle in the hallway, and my breath hitches every time I hear the sound of shoes close to our door. Not knowing whose they were, I walked over to the door and stood on my tiptoes. She's standing right in front of the door, as if she knows I'm standing behind it. She smiles that sinister smile of hers and says, "You can't run forever." "General." My eyes fly open, like I'm waking from the dead. I start up, tossing aside the blanket that had been tangled around my legs. Something woke me up. I kick dirty laundry out of the way and shift my body to sitting up, head swimming. The sunlight is too bright in the room, and I find myself squinting around. When I lean forward, my phone tumbles off my lap, hits the edge of the coffee table, and clatters to the floor. I wince. "Shh!" I hiss at it. Why is that so loud? It echoes through the whole house. I look down at the dark phone, way far away on the floor, and can't convince my arms to swing down to grab it. What's the point? So I can open it up and do what? I breathe in, smelling the stale smell of the old blankets wrapped around me in a cocoon. And because there's nothing better to do, breathe out again. I can feel stiffness in my stomach from the surgery, the stitches stretching with my skin. I'm hungry. I should haul myself to my feet, drag myself into the kitchen, and find something to eat. I try to imagine doing all of that, standing up, moving, opening the fridge, getting out ingredients, putting things in a bowl. I swing my head to the right. There's my water bottle. I can drink some water. I try to force my brain to imagine telling my husband, when he gets home from work, what I did today. I drank some water from my water bottle. I breathed in, and I breathed back out. I decided to keep breathing in and keep breathing out, because it was easier than not doing that. I look down at my right arm, and because it would be embarrassing if I can't even manage that, I lift my arm, pick up my water bottle with fingers made of lead, and swallow some water. I have been back from the hospital almost a week after my ordeal, and somehow swallowing water is still the most I can manage. The TV is on, and there's a very serious news lady droning on. She's talking about the spread of the virus, and there's a map with splotches of red. I don't want to listen to this, to see the red slowly seeping into our state, getting closer and closer to us. I want it to be quiet. She's talking so loud, she needs to be quiet. But I don't know where the remote is, and I don't know if I can remember which buttons to press. I lean my head back and think about going back to sleep. But if I go back to sleep, at some point, I'll be woken up again. And then what? Once, I liked waking up in the morning, greeting the fresh world and whatever the day held. Now, after what happened, when my eyes open, I just wonder when I can shut them again. I don't have to feel hungry when I'm sleeping, and don't have to worry about finding something to eat. Thump. There's a thump on the porch steps. My eyes trace past the cluttered living room, past the TV, out the window, and as he moves, I catch a glimpse of him. There's a zombie climbing the porch steps. I start to stand. Sharp pain shoots through my stomach. I stiffen and pause. Is that pain new? I don't remember it from yesterday. I leverage with my arms, stiff and sore, and haul myself to my feet. I kick at one sock that's slowly coming off my foot, and shuffle around the pile of laundry to get to the window. Surely I saw something else. Right? I'm sure I didn't see a zombie. The lady on the news is saying to be very, very careful. She's saying that the virus spreads not just from the bite, but that it's in the water supply too. She's impressing on us how dangerous it is, because everyone knows that zombies are incapable of hurting other zombies. That's why it's spreading so fast. I reach the window and stop. My arms are limp at my sides, and I can feel the lopsided bun on my head slowly falling out. There's something damp on my sweatshirt. What did I spill on my sweatshirt? Outside the window, I see him. He's climbing the porch steps. He's lifting one foot, and he's looking down at it. Then he's dropping it, thump, onto the step. He's lifting the next foot. He's looking at it. Then he's dropping it. Thump. I take a step back. He's an old man. A stranger I don't know. With stringy gray hair and mottled green skin. The brass buttons on his moldy wool coat still shine in the sunlight. Looking at them makes one half of my head ping with pain. His fingers are curled into claws. His face is gnarled into a wince. His teeth slimy and yellowed. I turn away. Thump. He's a step closer. I turn again. On the floor of the living room is a bath towel. Oh, that's why my shirt is wet. I took a shower this morning. I start to move, pushing my feet forward. One, then the next, then the other again. I reach for the doorway to the kitchen. Like, if I can find it with my fingers, I can draw myself through the doorway faster than my feet can move me. Why are my feet so slow? I kick the bath towel out of the way. It's still damp, like my sweatshirt. What do? I say, careful to keep my voice low. I'm somewhat surprised to hear my own slurred speech. Who am I talking to? What do? What was the plan? Was there a plan? My brain tried to slog through the past day, to remember the plan. I remember my husband this morning. He was leaving the house to go to work, I think. He must have been, because he was wearing his jacket and was standing in the doorway. And I was sitting on the couch, heavy-armed and tired. And he'd told me. What had he told me? The same thing he told me every day. Do something for yourself today. Just one thing. I must have said something back, because he smiled at whatever it was. One specific thing. I reach the kitchen doorway. That's why I took the shower. I remember now. That was something for myself. Thump. The newest thump was so much louder than the others that I grasped the kitchen doorway to keep myself from falling. A needle of pain wriggled through my abdomen. Quiet, I hiss toward the front porch. The zombie had made it up the steps and is at the door. I can see his shadow through the window as he leans heavily on the door. Thump. He hammers again. Shh, I say desperately. He needs to be quiet. Doesn't he know he needs to be quiet? I start to draw myself around the kitchen island, one hand over the other, guiding my stiff body. It's not as bright in here, and I can see better. My eyes fumble over old takeout containers and empty water bottles, and the sink piled high with dishes. Piled so high with dishes. Before I went to the hospital, I would have never let it get this bad. The gloves I usually use to wash the dishes are 1,000 miles away, down on the floor by several pairs of socks. Thump, crack, creak, creak. I stop, my hands placed on the kitchen counter, holding me still. I know that creak. It is a sound that washes over me every evening and fills me with relief. Why? Why do I love that sound? Now, it's the sound of the door opening as the zombie walks into my house. The zombie is walking into my house. No, oh no, I whisper and look around the dim kitchen. Where's my phone? It's in the living room. Thump, thump. Footsteps in the living room. And I hear a ragged, rancid breath. Suddenly, my hands let go of the kitchen counter, and I'm moving. My feet carrying me, careening through the house, stumbling, unmoored, out into the hall and across and into the dark, dark bathroom. The door shuts behind me, and I blink once and again and again. Images of the spinning rooms spiraling in my vision before settling into the dark outline of the bathroom. Sink, toilet, empty toilet paper rolls, trash overflowing, and from down the hall, from the living room, I hear a voice. I can hear you in here. No one ever told me. They talk. The zombie's voice drips under the bathroom door, snaking up my leg and draining into the pit of my stomach. His speech is slow and meticulous, his dead mouth trying to remember how to form words. You are breathing, the voice says. You are breathing so slow. Why are you breathing so slow? Why am I? I can't think. I can't make my brain think. All I can see when I close my eyes and remember is my husband standing in the doorway, looking at me. Why is he looking at me like that? Full of pity? Why is he speaking to me so slowly? Do one thing, he says, the words echoing in my sluggish mind. Do one specific thing, just for you. I did. I did what he said. I look at the bathtub. I took a shower. A few water droplets are still dripping down from the shower head. I move forward, leaving the bathroom door. I hear heavy footsteps moving so slowly through the house behind me. I need to tell the zombie to walk quieter. He needs to be quiet. I hold out a hand, and I shiver as a cold water droplet splashes into my palm. I can barely see it in the dark, but my heart starts to sink, slowly, dropping from my chest down into my stomach, where slow, steady panic is building just under my ribcage. Why am I full of dread? Why does the water on my skin make me feel sick? Why can't I move fast enough to get to safety? My brain used to be smart and quick. Now it isn't. I'm never going to be quick again. I will find you. I jump as the voice sounds again. This time, closer. He's just across the hall in the kitchen. He's looking at the sink full of dirty dishes. I yank my hand out of the shower like it's a fire and start moving again, letting my feet stumble and rush. My hand fumbles on the doorknob, and the door swings open, and I see a shadow cutting across the floor of the hall. I've lost a sock, and my feet stamp. 1, 2, 1, 2, down the hall. I pass a closed bedroom door on my way. Shh. I need to be quiet. Stop being so loud. Why are you running? The rasping voice grates through the house. I can feel you. You're tired. You want to sleep. I reach the basement stairs, and I stop. To my left, the back door of the house, leading out into the overgrown backyard, and the bright sunlight dappling on the grass and flowers. I think I can smell the fresh grass and perfume of the flowers, even from here. And to my right, the rickety basement stairs, leading down into moldy darkness. You don't want to escape. Where is there to escape to, anyway? My feet are stuck to the floor. I can't run. I look down at my hand, damp from the water from the shower, and I remember that I took that shower for me, and that when I was done, I sat on the toilet in my towel, shivering and shaking, and I didn't feel better, and my ears were ringing with screaming, and my head was aching, and my stomach was twisting, and I was tired. I told them at the hospital I was so tired, and they sent me home anyway. It's all I can think anymore. And no amount of warm showers make me feel better. Why not? I can't seem to feel better. I'm tired. I turn away from the back door, and my feet drop onto the basement steps. I hear him behind me. Thump, thump. He's following. My feet hit the basement steps. Thump, thump. He's following. I reach out, raking my fingers along the concrete walls, balancing my stumbling legs and feet. Where are my feet? Where did I leave them? Oh, they're here, right underneath me. I reach the cold floor of the basement and step over a puddle at the base of the steps, and I pass the light switch on the wall. I can see from the pale light that shines in through the small windows, bins and boxes piled up where I left them, half open and spilling their contents on the floor. That was from before, when I cared about organization and neatness. Now, I can't even look at them. That's right, the croaking voice says. It's coming from the top of the stairs. It's grinding down the wood steps and splashing onto the concrete floor. Go down into your grave. Go down to drown alone. You do not want to walk back up again. My fingers trail along the dusty top of a box, then the edge of a bookshelf loaded with cans of beans and tomatoes and vegetables. My glazed eyes trail over the rows of cans, and I have to blink myself awake. I used to be different. I used to be awake. After what happened, whatever else there is, It's like I'm gone. I have to press a hand to my stomach, holding in my stitches and my guts even to walk. I miss the person I used to be. My feet shuffle along, 1 foot warm, 1 foot cold, 1 sock on, 1 sock off. I weave my way through the old bikes and laundry baskets to where the washer and dryer are crouching in the corner. I can hear his loud feet on the steps. One thing, one specific thing, just for me. I want to scream, to fill my lungs and holler as loud as I can, but instead it comes out as barely a whisper. Be quiet, I hiss. You need to be quiet. My hands rest, 1 on the washer, 1 on the dryer. I pause. I need to remember how to use my knees. I look down, and I remember, and bend, twisting at the waist, and bending my creaking knees all the way down until I'm on the floor. It's damp down here, water trickling in through the cinder blocks and oozing through the cracks in the floor. I place 1 hand on the cold floor, the water stinging my fingers with how cold it is. I reach behind me with the other hand. He's on his way down the steps. The steady thump, thump, thump echoing through the house. He's going faster because he knows. He knows why I came down here. Shh! Behind me, a dial on a metal safe clicks. Thump, thump. Then, splash. He reaches the puddle at the bottom of the stairs, and my eyes slowly look up. Up. He's tall and broad-shouldered, and I can see, in the dim light, the glint of his yellow teeth gnashing together. His eyes narrow when he sees me. Click, click, the dial behind me. There you are, he says, and he's moving, his hands bumping into dusty boxes and canned goods. I'm still crouching, and I can feel the water seeping into my sweatpants. I should be shivering, but I'm not. It feels almost warm. Warm, like blood, like my blood, pumping through me, swift and sure. Here you are, he says. The safe clicks open, and my hand closes over something familiar and solid. You're hiding down here to be found, he says, an ugly smile curling his gray lips. I'm holding the familiar object in my hand, and his eyes land on it. The smile widens, his teeth grinding together, spit dripping out of his mouth and onto his moldy coat. I raise a shaking hand. I pull in breath, and I let it out again. You can't do that, he says, his mouth fumbling over the words, spitting them out one at a time. He raises a crooked finger with a broken, bloody nail, pointing toward the ceiling and the floor above us. If you do that, you won't be quiet. Don't you want to be quiet? I do want to be quiet. I want to curl up down here in the warm water and sleep, where I can't feel hungry and my stomach and hips and back don't hurt, where my head doesn't ache. He must see my shoulders sag, because he takes a shuddering step forward. You came down here to die. No, I say, and my voice is louder than it should be. One specific thing, just for me. I can feel my hands again as they raise the gun I'd pulled from the safe and level it at the zombie. His old, dead eyes don't change or look alarmed. I'm here because I want to live. Bang, thump. Upstairs, in the bedroom I had skipped, suddenly startled awake, my newborn baby starts to cry. I look at the rows of canned goods, vegetables and beans and soup. I think it's time to cook some lunch. Diary of a Serial Killer. How might one endure the silent and secluded nature of winter? Be the bear. Enter a deep cave. And dream. Jacqueline Suskin. I probably shouldn't be writing this, but oh fucking well. When the most precious thing lodged in your heart is ripped out and crushed by an unthinking alcoholic asshole driving with a revoked license, you do things, unimaginable things, and not just burying your beloved 8-year-old son, which was not on my shitty life bingo card, OVS, but life wasn't shitty before. The word should be capitalized. Before. No, better yet, the before, because now life was rent in two, forever separated by the gaping maw of rage. The before and the after. A fissure of overwhelming grief that quickly cracked, allowing the steaming, boiling lava to emerge from her core. Oh, he would pay, that drunken dickhead. His money won't protect him. Not from me. They gave her the code name Mama Bear, but he never imagined that she was holed up in a cave. On a hunch, he came out to the Pennsylvania woods at night, alone. Common sense and the FBI handbook would label his actions reckless at best and suicidal at worst, but he didn't fear for his safety. Mama Bear targeted a certain type of prey. Except for being a male, he didn't fit her profile. Funny. They were both profilers. October snuck up behind him, picking up the crisp air, tossing it around. Playing offense, it switched tactics, threw it toward his face, temporarily snatching his breath. He continued to climb, quiet crunching under his boots, allowing the patches of clearing and the light of the frosted full moon to guide his steps. He'd reach the cave no matter what, so the easy way was the best way. He put his hand in his front pocket, felt the crumpled page of a diary. The paper crinkled like the fallen leaves underfoot. It was mailed to him at his office. This one, and the other entries. He had the sense to turn in the others, but not this one. Well, most of the others. She vowed to herself that she would abstain from killing for a month. Or so she wrote. By his accounts, it was day 30. He hoped her undated entry referred to October. At least he would have a day. One day. It was easier than I thought. I would say too easy. but that motherfucker mowed down my baby like a shirtless, beer-bellied jickoff, hurrying to cut the grass before the Buccos game. Maybe it shouldn't be hard. Justice shouldn't be hard. Not in the semblance of a fair world. Leaves skittered and scurried around his legs, tumbling over each other like playing squirrels. He stopped, inhaled deeply. He loved the smell of fall. That last exhale of trees mixing with ripe decomposition. I'm so glad I live in a world of Octobers. He smiled at the memory of his sister, quoting Anne Shirley. Not so long ago, his smile fell. Not so long ago, yet forever ago. Tragedy has a way of altering time, elongating some parts and compressing others. He looked up through the lattice of bare limbs, a web of gnarled fingers, the indigo sky stitched with rhinestones. Did the stars foretell it? It was the mutable signs of the zodiac. Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, BTK, Dahmer, Bundy. The ones born at the end of a season, not in the middle, like the fixed signs. Like Scorpio. Like her, you'd think one was enough. But it wasn't. I realized AA, alcoholic asshole, was just one of many. Sure, I settled my score. But what of the other moms? So many blights, diseases walking the earth, infecting others with their cruelty, their carelessness, their capriciousness. Someone had to bring order, just like Melville Dewey did to book classification. Stoned to 99, he considered turning around to walk back down the hill. He turned, but didn't move. In the distance, the twinkling lights of downtown Pittsburgh weaved a terrestrial constellation of bridges, one-way traffic, and sundry skyscrapers. The Steel City, just like its people. Metal backbones, gritty guts, and honest hearts. He craved a sandwich from Primanti's. Any sandwich. That was the last time he saw her. At Primanti's, the original one, he wasn't one to second-guess himself. His mom drummed it into their heads from the cradle. Trust self first, last and only. First, last, only. Thanks to the internet and social media, it's not hard to find someone or their misdeeds. What was once relegated to a diary like this is now vomited onto Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for all to see. Many lap it up, probably because it makes them feel less uncomfortable about their own stupid decisions and meaningless lives. Here for the mindless braggart. Many blowhards make for less research when it comes to this side gig. He cracked his neck, onward and upward, one foot in front of the other, crunching leaves, whipping wind, snapping twigs. Up, up, up he climbed. He was getting close. His hand reached towards his front pocket. Again, he read the page dozens of times, just like the rest. He couldn't help it. Just touching the decal-edged diary page brought clarity and understanding. He had to find her first. Could it be that easy? I think this might be my last entry. I knew it was a bad idea. No, make that bad idea to write things down. But writers write. Fish swim, birds fly, dogs bark. Writers write. And mama bears? Well, unless you're bent from birth, looking at you, mutable signs, no one sets out to be a killer. Or, as I like to differentiate, a remover. Scrooge, Dickens, had it partly right. Decrease the surplus population. He just needed to add of assholes. Decrease the surplus population of assholes. Dangerous, foul, hollow assholes. He neared the ridge. He was getting close. He pulled out the wrinkled diary page. He couldn't help it. The moon illuminated the page, but he couldn't make out the words. Strange glyphs, occultic squiggles, just like those found on the astrological charts she used to interpret. Meaningless symbols to the untrained eye, but metaphysical gold to the mystic. He didn't need to be able to read the entry. He had it memorized, the cave. He could see the entrance. Dark, yawning, an inky maw, just like her rage. He reached into the other pocket for his flashlight. She beat him to it. Her flashlight shone on the ground ahead so as not to blind him. Hey, sis. Hey, bro. What took you so long? The gingerbread cookies. The gingerbread cookies. Let's go downstairs and bake some cookies like Mother used to make. The warm smell sits right at home in your nostrils, invading them like wild axe murderers, hacking and slashing their way through endless miles of human bodies that stand in the way of their inhumane, carnal desires. Shh, but that's too dark. It's Christmas, after all. So let's go downstairs and bake some cookies, like Mother used to make. One step, then two. Ooh, isn't this great? You've never baked gingerbread cookies before? Oh no, because you always thought that you would never be able to make them oh so good, like Mother used to. What did she say she made them with? Some kind of special ingredient. What was it? Was it sugar and spice and everything nice? Was it love? That special ingredient that every mother cooks with because you are their extra special little kid? Oh my, this is exciting. Your heart hammers against your rib cage as you set the oven to... Oh, you don't know what to set the oven to. You've never made these before. Probably 300 will be good. You bend down, spin the dial. But what's that? What the heck? There's already a baking tray in there. You take it out, confused. On it, there's a set of perfectly cut gingerbread men. They wear little black tuxedos with white buttons. Their smiles expose endless rows of sharpened, white teeth. And their wide green eyes watch you intently with their white pupils. In the center, one of them stares right at you, holding a folded-up note in its tiny dough hand. You snatch it from him, not caring about the little man's feelings. To my little boy, my, oh my, I can't believe how the years have passed. It seems like just yesterday that whatever secret deity governs this universe sent me to my untimely punishment beneath the earth's soil. I know, I was always so poetic, right? Now enjoy these cookies. I hope they taste just like how Mommy used to make. Love, Mother. Ding. Apparently, 10 minutes pass while you read that short letter. But to be fair, you don't read it once, do you now? You read it time after time until the words start doing tangos in your head as they spin spiderwebs around one another. Now, after it dings, you're supposed to put the cookies back in and start the baking, Mother said. How hot do you bake them? You asked. Hot, very hot, Mother said. But don't they not like being so hot? Oh, these little guys won't mind at all, Mother said. She slid the tiny men into the 300-degree heat chamber. She smiled. There was really nothing to it. Nothing to it. Well, there's nothing to it, you think, as you slide the baking tray in, and as the minutes tick by, their faces change. No more are the artificial smiles plastered on by a woman who would ruthlessly murder them. Now are the faces of men who know their deaths are coming. Smiles that slowly flatten in the corners as 3 minutes turn to 4, 5 minutes to 6, until the red frosting of their mouths fall clean off, and they can't shout for help. Just as you couldn't call the ambulance when you're there, Mother started clutching her heart and breathing heavily, minutes after she slid the baking tray filled with small people into the oven for the final time, yelling for you to get the phone, to get up, to do something, and not just sit there as the people cooked in their torture chamber. And then they come alive. One of them pokes its head up, its blank eyes staring into your heart. It's lifeless, dull, unknowing of the infernal fire around it, like you on that fateful night, not knowing that Mother will soon be gone for good. It looks at you, and then it stands on its 2 stubby legs, stumbling as it gets up. It walks to the edge of the baking tray, carefully navigating around its still dead, unconscious friends as they lie down, their backs against the aluminum's sun-hot surface. It looks its friends in the eyes, and maybe it thinks, I'm sorry that I'm here and you're not. And then steps over the edge, falling down into the oven's fiery, incomprehensible bottom. Clunk. Mother? You asked, your body shaking all over. Why was she on the ground? Why were her eyes closed? She may have been asleep for all you knew. Maybe she was. Maybe. And then they all stand up. They look like an army, all dressed in their uniform suits. One of them peers down and looks at its friend, all dismembered and burned on the oven's floor. It looks more like charcoal than a body. They form a single file line in the middle of the tray, a gingerbread snake, if you will. And one by one, each of them takes turns taking suicidal leaps off the edge. And one by one, you catch their faces as they take their fateful falls. "Stop crying, kid," they all say. "Mother will be okay." Clunk, clunk, clunk. The gingerbread charcoal pile grows and grows until it is a small mountain. In it, you see a face. Mother. And she smiles the gingerbread smile, looking at you. And you can't tell if it is a smile of relief or a smile of scorn. But it doesn't matter. Your mother's smile is the thing you have always wanted the most. And if this was the way you got it, then so be it. But that smile rang hollow, now devoid of any meaning, any life. An eternal reminder that Mother is gone, and who's to blame for that? And yet, you bake those cookies every year, forgetting that you tried the year before because the waves of memory forces their dark underbellies to recede. And every year, you hope that they taste like how Mother used to make, Elf off the shelf. From the beginning, there had only ever been one rule: don't let anyone see you move. But after what I saw tonight, I was afraid I was going to have to break that rule. The Duncans' house was full of people. From inside Mrs. Mitchell's purse, I carefully peeked out through the open zipper and saw dozens of recognizable faces. People who had come over to pick up Oliver and Squier's friends over the years. They were all laughing and eating and drinking merrily, despite Christmas having already passed. This I knew, because Mrs. Mitchell had already put me away for the season, which made it even more exciting when she had come back to retrieve me again so soon. Everyone was dressed festively in gold, green, and red. The Christmas tree was still brightly shining, and stockings still hung on the mantel above a lit fireplace. Jingle tunes buzzed across the room, and the smell of spiced cider simmered about. As I scanned the festive room, delighting in all its magic, I spotted a familiar face. But it was not just any face. No, this face looked quite like mine. So much like mine. In fact, I was certain it was mine. But was it possible? Another one of us had been granted access to such an exclusive event after Christmas? What were the odds? It took all my training and discipline, much like the effort I'd put forth when Mr. Mitchell accidentally dropped me in the toilet a few years back, not to call out and wave to my North Pole brother. Our mission had always been deemed a solo one. We'd known from the start that once we were sent off, it would be unlikely for us to see another of our kind again. Instead of calling out, I admired my fellow soldier for his composure and his stillness. His Mr. and Mrs. had him out for all to see. Not that we weren't used to being put on display. That was a rather big part of our job. But never had any of us, so I'd thought, been brought to an event like this. I imagined he was as gleeful and giddy about the whole thing as I was, but from where I watched, you'd never be able to tell. The sign of a strong soldier, indeed. Suddenly, a loud clinking sound echoed through the room. With a tap, tap, tap of his glass, Mr. Duncan had silenced the bustling crowd. "Good evening, everyone. I'm so delighted you're all here," he bellowed. "I'm pleased to welcome you to our 3rd annual Elf Off the Shelf ceremony, where we, dedicated and loving parents, get to liberate ourselves from this torturous and time-consuming holiday tradition, now that our children have outgrown their childish beliefs in the magic of Christmas." A loud cheer erupted across the room, but I didn't understand what they were cheering about. Liberate themselves? What holiday tradition? Tonight, we have 2 families who will be liberated: the Halberries and the Mitchells. Please, give these lovely couples a congratulatory round of applause for their long years of shelving their elves. Another roar rose across the room, and it was then that I realized why Mrs. Mitchell had brought me here. Suddenly, I felt heavy. Heavier than I felt on the days when Mrs. Mitchell unboxed me, having grown stiff after months of storage. Heavier than Mr. Mitchell when he accidentally sat on me. I dropped down below the zipper of the purse, letting the darkness and the realization consume me. They've come to liberate themselves from me. But what did that mean? I heard Mr. Duncan start talking again, so I lifted my head up out of the zipper. "Would either of you like to go first?" Mr. Duncan stared toward Sarah Halberry on the other side of the room, and just as he was about to look in my direction, Sarah cried out, "I would!" Her hand was raised and flailing. Her enthusiasm stung, and I hoped Mrs. Mitchell would not be so thrilled to part from me. Surely she wouldn't be, right? I snuck a peek at her face, but it was unreadable. Her eyes were glued on Sarah, who clutched my twin, Polly, between her fingers. Still, he did not flinch. What are they going to do with him? Chuckling at her enthusiasm, Mr. Duncan said, "Well, come on up here, darling. Bring old Polly with you for everyone to see." With Sarah now at Mr. Duncan's side, he began, "Well, Sarah, I can tell you're excited to get on with it. But we've got a few things to get through before we say goodbye to little Polly. Tell us, You dedicated how many years to this little guy? 17 years? Now, Sarah was holding Polly displayed on the palm of her hand, oscillating her arm from left to right to show the whole room his face. Whoa, 17 years? You must have started right when these little guys came out, huh? Sarah nodded proudly, but her eyes seemed to say something darker, nearly bulging out of her head. I sure did. Well, that's just fantastic. Really, really fantastic. So, let's see here. Huh? Can you tell me one of your favorite memories with Polly? Mr. Duncan asked. My favorite memory. Sarah stopped turning and pulled Polly closer to herself, inspecting him. I noticed her face soften as her memory scanned the past, and I couldn't help think about my own favorite memory with the Mitchells, remembering the time she moved me into the fridge. It had been a cold night in there, but when Oliver found me in the morning, clutching an empty pickle jar, his childish giggles warmed me right up. And when he and Schuyler told Mrs. Mitchell that I'd climbed into the fridge and ate all the pickles, Mrs. Mitchell pretended she knew nothing about it. That was the moment I fell in love with the Mitchell family. And that was why I was having such a hard time understanding why the Mitchells were planning to get rid of me. We were part of their families. Didn't they see that? I guess it would have to be the time I wrapped one of his legs with tissue paper and wrote a little sign next to him that said, "In recovery. I'll be healed in 3 days." Ugh, it was such a relief not to have to move him for half a week. The room exploded with more applause and cheering. I'd remembered when Mrs. Mitchell had done something similar, setting me up on a small towel underneath a houseplant. Her note had said that I was on a vacation and that I'd be back the next day. I'd appreciated the break. Having to hold still in all sorts of poses around the house is not exactly easy. But I'd thought she was doing it to relieve me, a kind reward for all my hard work. Very creative, Sarah. And those of us who are still shelving our elves certainly have a lot to learn from your innovative ideas, don't we? Now, care to indulge us in your worst memory with Polly? We like to end on a bad note, as it tends to make the final goodbye a little easier. Mr. Duncan chuckled. Something about the way he said "final goodbye" made me uncomfortable, and Mrs. Halberry's sinister smile only made me feel worse. The worst memory with Polly? I watched as she squeezed Polly in her hands, and it felt as if I were the one between her tense grip. Now that's easy. The pause in her words held the room nearly silent, save for the crackling of the fire. It was not like the magical silence of stockings waiting to be filled by Santa on Christmas Eve. Rather, it was full of darkness. I couldn't take my eyes off of Mrs. Halberry and poor Polly so helpless in her hands, and then he wasn't in her hands anymore. I'd barely heard Mrs. Halberry say, "All of it," before I saw Polly soaring in midair towards the fireplace, his smile brightly intact as he was flung into the flames. I watched, speechless, horrified, trembling, as Polly landed amidst the blazing inferno. The fire popped and bloomed as it devoured him, engulfing his hat and body instantly in vicious heat. My eyes begged me to make it stop, but I couldn't look away. I wanted to scream, "No," and to leap out of Mrs. Mitchell's purse and lunge to Polly's rescue, but I was frozen in my terror. Why was nobody doing anything? Why did nobody stop that wretched Mrs. Halberry? How could they let? That's when the sounds of celebration finally registered. They were cheering. They were whooping and hollering. I peeked a glance at Mrs. Mitchell and almost fainted at the sight of her. She was clapping, smiling even. What was this party of horror? Who was this woman I had dedicated my existence to? This was certainly not the Mrs. Mitchell I knew. This was, "Well done," Mr. Duncan guffawed, patting Mrs. Halberry on the shoulder. "Guess you were too eager to wait for the formalities, huh, Sarah? Feels good, doesn't it?" She was jumping up and down and clapping next to him, a smile as grand as a child's on Christmas morning. Monster. She was a monster. All right, dear. The whole party thanks you for your contribution and your entertainment. Why don't you go join Paul? And we'll invite the Mitchells up here for their liberation, shall we? If my heart had been working, it wasn't anymore. I dropped back into Mrs. Mitchell's purse, unsure if I had the discipline to conceal my terror. Somewhere inside me, I knew the truth, but I couldn't fight my denial from at least trying. Would the Mitchells really kill me? Mrs. Mitchell's hand found me and pulled me from my dark haven. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. Not like how it does on Christmas to assists Santa's impossible task, but like the sensation of fear, where every minute movement and sensation feels important because you're unsure if it will be your last. I had hoped all of it would be revealed as a dream, but as I rose out from the zipper, I saw the same malevolent faces, all of them staring hungrily in my direction. I'd had no context for such evils, had not even fathomed such perversities could exist around Christmas. And yet, there I was, the target of a ruthless and angry mob of parents. Mrs. Mitchell was quicker and peppier than I'd expected her to be, scurrying towards the front of the fireplace, eager for her turn at murderous betrayal. I did the only thing I knew how to do, the only thing I'd been trained to do. I remained still, sitting poised and cheerful in her hands as she showed me off to the pack of wolves like a sliced Christmas ham. This is Skipper. We got him when our oldest was 2.5, so he's been a tradition in our home for nearly 14 years. I was so relieved when Skylar told me she no longer cared for the stupid thing. Gasp. What an awful thing to say. Carla told me about this little ceremony she conjured up a few years ago. And since then, I just couldn't wait for my day to come. A murmur was rising in the crowd when Mr. Mitchell made his way to Mrs. Mitchell's side. He wrapped his arm around her waist and said, "Oh, come on, dear. You're not even a little sad about it. It's the end of an era." People snickered, and Mr. Mitchell's smile grew wide. I recognized his joking tone, but now it felt like pure mockery. It made me wish I'd never forgiven him for leaving me in the bathroom that day. Mrs. Mitchell tilted her head in consideration and placed a hand on Mr. Mitchell's face. "Aw, honey, there's a lot about the kids being little that I'll miss, but this isn't one of them. Maybe if you'd been more helpful." She pinched his cheek, and they both giggled like mischievous beasts plotting their most vile acts. "I helped," Mr. Mitchell defended. This time, it was mostly just the men in the room who laughed. "You moved him twice in 14 years. They were great hiding places?" Mrs. Mitchell scoffed. "The toilet is not what I consider a great place, Sam." "Okay, that time didn't count. I brought him to the bathroom with me and forgot about him. More to my point, you weren't helpful?" Mrs. Mitchell pecked Mr. Mitchell on the lips. "It's okay. I still love you. But you'll forgive me for being a little excited to not have to do this anymore." Mr. Duncan slung an arm around Mrs. Mitchell's shoulder. "All right, you two. I can see you're just as eager as Sarah was, so should we get on with it then? We know Skipper's name, and I'm assuming your worst memory with him was this, toilet incident. Is that right, Sam? Are there any good memories with Skipper you care to share before your final goodbye?" Lifeless in her hands, I willed her to remember all our good times together. They had to have been real to her. They had to have meant something, the way I know they meant something, not just to me, but to Skylar and Oliver. Remember their little faces, lit up each morning at the surprise of my new location. Remember how happy they were when Thanksgiving ended because they knew I would arrive soon. I'd brought joy to them for 14 years. How was it possible that they could throw me away? Well, there was one thing. Mrs. Mitchell's voice trailed off. I felt her grip loosen slightly, and a sparkle of hope twinkled in my soft, fluff-filled belly as she turned me in her hands to face her. Lifting me up to her eye level, she stared directly into mine, and I saw 1,000 memories swirling around her glistening green eyes. I'd always thought they looked like the most beautiful holiday wreaths in the world. I'd admired them so many times, but this time I begged her to return the favor. Which moment was she remembering now? The time I mowed the lawn? Or the time I built a gingerbread house and ate part of the roof? Whatever point in our past it was, I wondered if it would be enough to change her mind about all of this. Oh, never mind. All of it was just silly, and I'm so relieved to be done with it. Yeah! The crowd cheered, and my heart sank lower than the thermostat at the North Pole. She was really going to go through with it. What was I going to do? I heard Mr. Duncan spouting off more jokes, and I knew I was losing time. If I didn't do anything soon, I was about to be tossed into the fireplace alongside my now molten friend, Polly. Poor Polly. Had he even an inkling of what his fate had in store for him? Had he loved and trusted the Halberries as I had loved and trusted the Mitchells? I had not known him well, but I'd like to believe that if he'd had any idea about what they were going to do to him, he would have done something to stop it, even if it meant breaking the number one rule. I was still gazing into Mrs. Mitchell's eyes when I saw her lips beginning to form the words, "Goodbye." It was then that I decided I wouldn't let this happen. It was then that I broke my stillness. I leaned forward and slapped her across the face. "How dare you?" I huffed, and the sound of my own voice shocked me, for it had been many years since I heard it. I thought we were family, but families don't burn other members of their family, with my voice being so high-pitched and quiet. It took a moment for everyone to realize what was happening. But once they saw Mrs. Mitchell's face, frozen in an expression of horror, the room fell deathly silent. "Skipper?" Mrs. Mitchell breathed, but by then, I was already out of her hands. I jumped up onto the fireplace mantel and raced across it. I grabbed a hold of some tinsel garland and flew myself across the room towards the Christmas tree, grateful that this one still had its star-shaped tree topper. I remembered long, long ago when Santa had warned us that if we'd ever had an emergency, it was the tree toppers that could quickly transport us to safety. The fear that they might catch me fueled my speed, and quickly I climbed through the branches, the ornaments, and the string of lights all the way up to the top, feeling every single malicious eye searing through my back. Once I finally reached the top, I was breathless. I turned to face the room of malevolent demons and realized my fear had been unwarranted. None of them had moved an inch since I'd sprang into action. Every single one of them was frozen, mouth agape and staring, as petrified as I had been, watching from within Mrs. Mitchell's purse. I even saw Sarah peek towards Polly's ashen remains in the fireplace. I scanned the faces of them all, and when I landed on the Mrs. Mitchell, I narrowed my eyes. "You owe Schuyler and Oliver a jar of pickles," I said. Then I placed my hand on the glistening star atop the Duncan's Christmas tree, and like a sudden stroke of magic, it was I who was finally liberated. 28 sleighs later, above the laughter and Christmas music, the bang against the door came. Thump, thump, thumped. Paul Reyes sighed. He patted his wife's hand and pushed his chair away from the table. "Don't worry, love. I've got this one." Rosemary frowned at him. "But everybody's here. Who could it be?" He stopped. Rose had framed the doorbell with tinsel. You couldn't miss it. It would take a brain-dead person to knock instead of ringing. He shrugged. "Carolers, or something. I'll give 'em a quid and tell 'em to bugger off." A round of laughter rippled around the table. The playlist swapped over to Wham's Last Christmas. Outside in the front hall, the door shuddered again. Thump, thump, thump. It banged hard enough to make the door viot in its frame. Annoyance flickered in his mind. The nerve of some of these charity-begging types. He wasn't one to sniff at donations, but give a man ample time to get up. And don't knock his door down like you're the wolf versus the 3 little pigs. He hurried along in his slippers. I'm coming! Hold your horses!" But still, the banging continued. Thump, thump, thump. The little panes of glass at the top of the door vibrated and threatened to shatter. The figure of a man swayed beyond, blurry and dark. Paul gritted his teeth. He'd have some stern words for whoever it was. It didn't matter what good cause they were raising money for. This behavior was downright rude. He slid the chain off and yanked the door open. "Oh, for goodness sake, what's your prob?" The man behind the door barged through, snarling and screeching. He wore a parka coat with its fur-ringed hood raised. It framed his mess of a face. He had blood smeared all across his skin, and his nose was missing. A window shattered somewhere in the back of the house, and a woman shrieked. Paul's stomach dropped, and he screamed. He grappled with the invader and grabbed a hold of his shoulders. "What?" he grunted. "Let go of me." The man clawed at Paul's shirt. He leaned forward and snapped his teeth. His breath was rotten, and he had bits of ragged meat caught between his teeth. He snarled like a wildcat, and his eyes were white, except for tiny pinpricks of blackness in the center. He flinched backwards from the bites. It was almost as if the maniac wanted to bite his nose off, too, as revenge for losing his own. Whatever was wrong with him, drugs, he guessed. He was dangerous, and Paul had to stop him. Paul grabbed the nearest thing from the shelf on the wall, an animatronic snowman. He smacked the madman across the face with it. Jingle Bell Rock played from the crappy speakers, and the snowman started to boogie. Paul hit the man with it again and again. "Get out! Get out!" The man recoiled from each blow of the rubber decoration. He snarled and shrieked, backing away through the front door as Paul struck him. At some point, something mechanical cracked inside the snowman. The song came out slurred and slow. Jack Frost danced slower. One arm snapped off, and his head dented inwards. Blood smeared across his white body. Adrenaline surged through Paul's veins, reminding him of how it felt to be a young man. He became aware of his battle cry as he fought the mauled lunatic out of his home. With the noseless man wobbling on the threshold, Paul landed a kick into the guy's gut. "And stay out!" he roared. The man went sprawling backwards over the Reyes' front steps. He clattered into a heap at the foot of their driveway. At the top of the driveway staggered a group of people. 2 men and 4 women. Each had various ghastly wounds, like the noseless assailant. A cheek torn open here, an eye gouged out there. Intestines spilt out of one woman's belly and trailed behind her like a bridal train. Across his small patch of lawn in front of the lounge windows, a woman with one arm shambled towards him. Paul's nerves turned to liquid, and his legs to jelly. He whimpered and felt his bladder threaten to release. He scrambled for the door, missed, found the handle, and slammed it shut. With shaking hands, he slid the chain back across, his fingers slaked with gore. "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus," he whispered to himself. Immediately, the door began to bang again, and so did the windows looking into the lounge. And the screams from the back of the house continued, high-pitched and terrified. Goose flesh rippled up all over Paul's body. These nutcases had surrounded the house. He had no idea what they wanted, but he guessed it wasn't a cup of cocoa. He pushed off from the vibrating door and strode towards the sound of the commotion. He brandished his decoration/weapon. Rose, in the kitchen, some of the attackers had smashed their way through the windows. The glass sliced their forearms to ribbons, but they didn't care. They were trying to pull Rose out by her hair. She shrieked and kicked and batted at the hands to no avail. Several of their guests stood by and watched, their faces drawn in a rictus of shock. They still held their alcoholic beverages. Sean from next door had gone white, and his beer was tipping and spilling on the kitchen tiles. Paul froze. Rose had always argued about getting double glazing, but he'd deferred. He now wished he'd listened to his wife. How long until the front windows, looking out onto the lawn, shattered under the strain? He slapped himself across the face and raced into the fray, swinging Frosty for all his worth. He smacked at the hands that snaked through the glass over and over and over again. "Get off my wife, you damn hooligans!" That broke the paralysis spell over the others. The kitchen became a flurry of activity as people dropped drinks and grabbed a hold of Rose. Gail Clark yanked on Rose's feet, pulling her back into the house. In his vest and tie combo, Sean lobbed his pint glass through the window with a violent yell. The claws clutching Rose weakened enough for her to break away. Rosemary collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She held her hands to the blotchy red patches of yanked-out hair. Paul's mind was a flurrying snowstorm of thought. He stood in the kitchen, chest heaving. He stared out at the people gathered in his back garden. "Zombies," he said, not quite believing himself. "They're goddamn zombies." The swaying figures closed in on the house. Bangs and clangs echoed from the front. The dim winter light faded as the bodies blocked out the windows. They moaned in a chorus of the dead, their bloodied hands slapping against the four walls. Someone asked, "What do we do, Paul?" I don't," a woman screeched. "They're coming down the fireplace." An ice shard speared through Paul's core, and the world seemed to slow. "Sweet baby Jesus," he mumbled. An enormous thud shook the foundations of the house. The survivors staggered to the walls for support. Paul shook his head clear. He tightened his grip on Frosty and ran for the lounge. He skidded to a halt as a cloud of coal dust settled across the room, coating the furniture and the tree. The hell? The smog cleared to reveal a massive man in a red and white suit. He kneeled, fists on either side, like the Terminator from that Schwarzenegger flick. A large brown sack slung over his shoulder. He had heavy-duty black boots, and a Santa hat clung to his head. Paul's insides shriveled. He'd fought off the one at the door because they'd been roughly the same size. But this one? No chance. He tried to speak, but found that all the spit had evaporated from his mouth. Only a tiny mouse-like squeak came from his vocal cords. The giant looked up. His eyes sparkled above two rosy cheeks. The orbs looked normal. No cataractic whiteness, narrowing to a black pinprick. A big, thick, white, bushy beard sprouted from his face. Paul dropped the damaged Frosty, which bounced to the laminate wooden floor. His head spun like he'd taken a right hook to the dome. "Santa?" Paul whimpered. Santa smiled, but the smile was fleeting. "Yes, Paul, it is me. Do not be afraid." He glanced at the window, which showed the growing horde pressing against it. "But you should be afraid of those naughty boys and girls." Paul's heart hammered high up in his chest, like a hummingbird trapped in his torso. His brain kept rifling through facts and thoughts as if to make sense of it all. His old thinker kept coming up short. It threw its cards in the air and searched through the rubble again. "What?" He licked his lips. "What do we do?" Santa grinned and stood up. He was 8 feet tall and towered over Paul and the others. If he were any taller, he wouldn't be able to stand upright in this house. He chuckled a deep, throaty laugh. "Ho, ho, ho." It rumbled through the earth like a bear's growl. Santa unslung his sack and upended it onto the living room floor. Machetes, blades, baseball bats, cricket bats, axes and chainsaws, swords and knives, flamethrowers and guns, even a grenade, and armor. It looked like police riot gear, except it had the symbol of a snowflake. "I have brought you well-behaved children, some toys to play with." Paul regained some of his lost nerve at the sight of the armory. With this elf-like giant on their side, they could turn the tides of battle. He bent down and picked up a chainsaw. "Groovy," Santa bowed. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a few 100,000 more homes to equip for the coming siege." Out beyond the front window, a reindeer with a red nose was fighting off zombies with its antlers. It was winning. Paul felt like someone had punched the wind out of him. His eyes darted from Santa to the fireplace. "You mean you won't stay? Won't stay and fight? We won't last without you. I am afraid there are others who need me." Santa raised one gloved finger. "Remember, Paul, jealousy and greed are very naughty." He gestured to the treasure hoard on the ground. "I brought you these because you have all been good. Let us keep it that way. Will you at least tell us why this is happening?" Santa narrowed his eyes. "When there is no more room in ho-ho hell, the dead will walk the earth." And with that, he vanished back up the chimney in the blink of an eye. In the background, the glass front window started to crack. A lightning bolt fault line zigzagged. Paul revved the chainsaw and beckoned his friends and family. "Let's do this. Everyone, arm yourselves. Rose, stay behind me. Put some armor on." Gail picked up a spear and donned a helmet. She pulled up alongside Paul and jabbed at the air between them and the fracturing window. A flurry of movement in the distance showed that Rudolph was still fending off the zombies. Gail screeched. "Jesus is the only zombie we allow this time of year." Paul took the lead and strode forward, chainsaw in front like a jouster. Sean drew alongside with a shotgun. He pumped it, and 2 red shells bounced to the Reyes' rug. Sean had a steely look in his eyes that Paul had never seen before. He didn't even know the man could handle a gun. "The only thing we should be eating is turkey." The window gave way, and the zombies flooded in. Paul raised the growling chainsaw and went to battle. Rest in peace on earth. O unholy night, Iceland's winter festivities are a perfect excuse to feast and make merry, and I partake with an insatiable appetite. I adore the endless nights wandering abroad and relish chance encounters with hapless stragglers trudging home. They all laugh when I tell them carol singing's not to my taste, and chuckle when I say choristers are delightful and sweet. But how their mirth dissolves as I envelop them in my cloak and whisper, "What a toothsome treat you are. You're good enough to eat." I despise summer, like all cold-blooded creatures, preferring a catatonic sleep to roasting in the sun. Every autumn, I anticipate the evening when Ingvar disturbs my estivation, and I return to a nocturnal lifestyle. He disinters my casket from the family plot every year during the first week of December. It's a tradition my loyal retainer has followed for years, just like his father, and his father's father, ad infinitum. It's impossible to find reliable help these days. And so, despite Ingvar's poor social skills, I re-employ his services annually. Ingvar obeys my written orders to the letter on the pain of death. If not in this life, then his neck. Thwack, crunch. My mind basks in a dream state when Ingvar invades my solitude, hacking through the icebound earth above. Crake, skreek. I hear the shovel scrape debris off the wooden lid, and his doleful voice murmuring a tuneless refrain. The unsettling melody stirs my clouded mind like a moorland breeze whistling through gnarled branches. Its clashing dissonances offend my refined musical sensibilities and cause my heart to quiver and contract. Lub, dub, lub, dub, lub, dub. My constricted arteries dilate as Ingvar wrenches at the coffin nails with his claw hammer. His frenzied efforts cause minor explosions in the darkness, dusting the threadbare silk lining with clouds of grit. As Ingvar prizes open the ancient pine lid, my sensitive eyeballs roll upwards, avoiding the moon's inquisitive gaze. My rib cage twitches in a violent spasm as wheezing lung sacs inhale clean air. I choke and splutter before coughing out stale fumes that rasp my withered throat like a rusty file. With each heartbeat, blood churns throughout my aching body, carrying oxygen to every cell. It's always the most painful part of my awakening. Pins and needles prickle each desiccated sinew, and every limb screams as it receives life-giving fluid. The blood returns to the heart after delivering oxygen, and my mind explodes with predatory thoughts anew. My throbbing heart sends the blood to lungs that strain hard to collect more air. I reflux and retch a pint of sticky phlegm from deep down. Ingvar is used to this unsightly reaction and tends to the detritus with a clean cloth. His caring touch is delicate and professional, and his face is unflinching. He lacks any sentiment. This is his business. Ingvar had strict instructions prior to my exhumation. He was to source a flask of fresh blood by whatever means necessary. The task never varies, but the source depends whereabouts I resume my existence. We're never in the same town twice, for obvious reasons. He's learned to adapt to my circumstances with undeniable efficiency. Ingvar has my best interests at heart, and he's also on the payroll. This winter season, he's moored our vessel in a quiet northwestern harbor outside Sudavik. It's an unassuming fishing town with a medical center and a venue for blood donors. Once on shore, he disguised himself and liberated a quart from their supply. It's a rich-looking concoction that will suffice for now. However, it's not the same as sinking my teeth into a warm jugular and slurping on the real deal. Ingvar steadies my quivering hands as I raise the glass container to my lips. I close my weary eyelids, and after a few sips, everything calms down. My sweaty palms dry out, and my prune-like fingers appear to elongate as my skin tightens. The sagging flesh under my jaw disappears, and my furrowed brow loses its careworn lines. At last, the throbbing pain behind my eyeballs dissipates, and my labored breathing settles into a regular rhythm. My once erratic heart beat chugs at a steady rate, and the queasiness in my stomach eases after a discharge of rancid gas. My rejuvenation is complete, and I rise from the coffin to assume my full height, like a magnificent butterfly casting off its shriveled chrysalis and unfurling its wings before flight. I nod at my retainer, and he tips his forelock and bows. I acknowledge his endeavors with a satisfied smile and survey the snowbound nightscape, glistening like an ocean of diamonds under the moon's bashful glow. Ingvar wafts his left hand through the air, shepherding me towards the waiting brougham with his outstretched right arm. Two majestic black drays snort white plumes from flared nostrils beside my handsome carriage. We take our seats as pristine snowflakes descend and settle on the bodywork's polished ebony. It's a fine welcome and a tremendous relief to be undead once more. The sight of my baleful old vehicle cantering through the small coastal town of Sudavik draws little attention. In previous years, the ominous rumble of hooves and creaking coach springs would herald an unfamiliar guest. But the inhabitants have other issues this year. They've entombed themselves within their homes, battened down their pine window shutters, and laced their thresholds with wreaths of protective herbs, ensuring plenty of garlics on hand. It should flatter me they fear the visit of a malevolent nocturnal predator. However, the precautions aren't for my sole benefit. The coronavirus's arrival has influenced behavior, and the government has enforced a lockdown. Ingvar understood there were unusual circumstances this year, but thought it prudent to interrupt my deep slumbers. Regardless, my initial reaction was one of joy. What better return could I expect than to discover piles of bodies waiting to be devoured? However, it transpires that the Health and Safety Department has issued an edict. Local undertakers are to dispose of the corpses through the crematorium. The local council is determined to sanitize the town and cleanse the region. I hadn't connected the hazy fog lingering above the coastline with the current climate of dread. Sudovik's furnaces are working overtime to dispose of the deceased. The impact on my festive plans is catastrophic. Citizens locked away in their homes until further notice. No bodies languishing on mortuary slabs, waiting for morticians, and funerals performed in secrecy with the bereaved attending by Zoom. None of these scenarios bode well for a creature of my particular inclinations. I'll need to redraft Ingvar's commands with caveats that cater to similar events. A do not resuscitate clause should cover matters in the future. As for now, we'll retreat to the mountains, and I'll ponder the options. Iceland's 13 days of celebrations leading up to Christmas are a disaster for all the residents. Children won't be leaving shoes beside their open bedroom windows. There'll be no trolls gifting trick-or-treats this year. The authorities have banned the Yule lads' nightly visits. It's a bleak prospect all round. I have some tough decisions to make as we ascend to my mountaintop fortress. Most years, I'd prowl along local shores, searching for lonesome visitors and lost souls. My spirit descends into a quagmire as I contemplate the prospect of scouring isolated fjords for bilious vagrants and ill-kempt vagabonds. It seems unlikely that I'll quench my thirst this winter. The locals have barricaded themselves in their homes, and according to Ingvar, they're low on stock at the blood bank. As the days trickle past, the wind howls like a wounded banshee, and the ground hardens to rock. The snows gather in drifts, blocking our descent and jeopardizing my strategic movements. Ingvar spends his days grooming the horses, and at night he sips his supplies of Brennivin. Most evenings he passes out from its effects, having buried himself under a mountain of furs. He knows his services are not required during these hard times, despite being primed to chauffeur me down the mountain on a whim. I've endured centuries of this existence. Life is relative, of course. It isn't a life most know. It's punishment for cheating death. Centuries of endless torture in purgatory. I'm cursed to roam forever, fearful of daylight, and all for a few drops of blood. I suppose it could be worse. There's a contagious disease in the vicinity, I guess it'd just be my luck if I contracted the coronavirus, wouldn't it? A year of coughing and wheezing inside my casket is inconceivable. The thought is most unappealing. And so, it's time to call it a night. Ingvar must enter my coffin until the epidemic's over. Maybe my luck will improve next year.